From the moment Officer Daniel Roberts set foot on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, nothing seemed out of the ordinary until he spotted a modestly dressed black family poised to board a sleek Gulfstream GC650. In that split second, disbelief flickered across his face, curling his lips into a sneer. He couldn't fathom how this family, Malcolm, Denise, and 15-year-old Leah Johnson, could possibly afford a private jet. When they offered their boarding passes, he laughed in their faces. But his taunts would echo far beyond the runway. What happened next would shock onlookers, rattle the aviation world, and spark a high-stakes standoff, unlike anything anyone had seen. The morning sun glimmered over Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, painting the sky in a gradient of orange and pale blue. Executive jets, each gleaming with polished metal and tinted windows, were lined up on the tarmac. Ground crew bustled with headsets and neon safety vests, directing planes to hangars, loading luggage, and prepping for takeoff. Officer Daniel Roberts had been stationed at Teterboro for the past year, handling security checks and ensuring that only authorized personnel made it onto private flights. The assignment was usually calm, even dull. He missed the so-called excitement of chasing suspects through city streets. But over time, that humdrum routine molded him into a figure of unwavering authority on the airfield. He liked to think he had an eye for trouble. He nursed a cup of stale coffee, scanning the small crowd near the jetway. Most passengers boarding private planes at Teterboro looked the part: designer, luggage-tailored suits, or the relaxed but unmistakable wealth vibe. Officer Roberts had grown accustomed to a certain kind of passenger people whose wealth was on brazen display. So when he spotted Malcolm Johnson wearing a simple button-down shirt and Denise Johnson dressed in casual slacks, holding their daughter Aaliyah's hand, his assumption was swift. They don't belong here. Even from a distance, he could see them talking to a pilot, Captain Richard Hughes. Hughes had already taken the family's carry-on bags and was guiding them toward the steps of the sleek Gulfstream G650. It looked brand new, sporting a shimmering silver exterior with subtle navy detailing along the fuselage. The scene struck Officer Roberts as odd. Something about that family looked too normal to be stepping onto such an expensive aircraft. As he wandered closer, he caught the tail end of their conversation. "Thank you again, Captain Hughes," said Malcolm, a pleasant smile on his face. "We appreciate you making this flight on such short notice." "My father," he stopped mid-sentence as Officer Roberts loomed behind them, boots clacking heavily on the asphalt. The pilot, with a crisp uniform and an authoritative stance, turned to greet the officer. "Good morning, sir," Captain Hughes said, politely tipping the brim of his cap. "Is there a problem?" Officer Roberts ignored the pilot for the moment, directing his attention to the Johnsons. He appraised them with a smirk, his gaze lingering on their more modest attire. Something dark sparked behind his eyes. "Pardon me," he said, in a tone that suggested anything but politeness. "Can I see some identification?" Malcolm, taken aback, exchanged a glance with Denise before digging into his back pocket for his wallet. He presented his driver's license, the private jet membership card, and a flight confirmation slip. Denise showed her ID as well, and even Aaliyah rummaged in her backpack for her school ID, feeling the tension as she tried to comply with an adult who didn't seem to trust them. Roberts snatched the documents and flicked through them with feigned diligence. He looked up, studied their faces, and then let out a short, derisive laugh. This is a private flight," he said, as though explaining something obvious. "What are you doing here?" His tone was condescending, but Malcolm kept his composure. "We're boarding this plane, officer, for a family emergency." Roberts shook his head slowly, that mocking smile not leaving his face. Must be some emergency if you can afford this kind of plane. Captain Hughes stepped forward, clearing his throat. Officer, I'm Captain Richard Hughes. I've reviewed their credentials. Everything is in order, and we need to prepare for an on-time departure. But Roberts didn't budge. He stared down Malcolm and Denise like a predator sizing up its prey, each second heightening the unease. Behind him, the bustle of the tarmac continued, but it felt as though a spotlight had been thrown on this standoff. All I'm saying, the officer drawled, is that it's a little suspicious. Denise's cheeks burned, and Aaliyah squeezed her mother's hand, her youthful face etched with confusion. Malcolm squared his shoulders. We've done nothing wrong, Officer Roberts. Our flight was booked legitimately. If you have any questions, you're welcome to verify with the airline or with Captain Hughes. Officer Roberts just laughed again, a cruel bark cutting through the hum of jet engines. Sure. Let me just do that, he said sarcastically. Then he pivoted on his heel and strode off to the security booth, clearly with no intention of apologizing or letting them board smoothly. Captain Hughes exhaled, frustration evident. I'm so sorry. This shouldn't be happening. Let me see if I can expedite this. He's never questioned my passengers so harshly. I've flown countless clients without trouble. Malcolm placed a hand on the pilot's arm. Thank you, Captain. But I've dealt with people like him before. We'll sort it out. Before the pilot could respond, they heard a faint crackle from the airport public address system. Another flight was preparing to taxi, fueling the hustle around them. The Johnsons lingered near the jet, uncertain, feeling Officer Roberts' eyes on them from across the tarmac. No one could predict how far he would take his suspicions or the trouble he was about to unleash. But one thing was certain: the Johnsons' peaceful departure would be tested, and the first domino to fall was already tilting dangerously. Malcolm Johnson was not a stranger to adversity. Born in Newark, New Jersey, he grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, and making ends meet was a daily grind. His father, James Johnson, a hard-working mechanic, had instilled in him the values of diligence and humility. James often said, "A person's character is revealed in how they treat those they don't need anything from." That mantra guided Malcolm through his formative years. He discovered a knack for problem-solving and engineering in middle school. Teachers urged him to enroll in advanced math and science courses. Scholarships got him to Princeton University, where he excelled in mechanical engineering. After graduation, he took a risk by launching a tech startup focusing on sustainable energy solutions, particularly portable, solar-powered generators that could be used in off-grid communities. The business soared, attracting attention from investors and even landing a segment on CNN after a natural disaster relief program used Malcolm's generators to power medical tents. Though they had the means to live lavishly, Malcolm and Denise maintained a comfortable but down-to-earth lifestyle. They preferred family dinners at home to high-profile galas. Their daughter Aaliyah attended a good public school. They only recently upgraded from a small condo to a modest suburban house with a yard. Everything was carefully chosen to keep them rooted and to instill strong values in Aaliyah. Denise played an equally large role in the family's success. She had graduated from Rutgers University with a major in business administration. She handled the administrative and financial aspects of Malcolm's enterprise. When the business skyrocketed, she expanded their philanthropic reach. They donated portable generators to underfunded schools in inner cities. They sponsored scholarships for young entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds. The Johnson name became known in certain circles as synonymous with giving back. At 15, Aaliyah was blossoming into a thoughtful teenager. She loved science and art, combining them in drawings of futuristic cities powered by clean energy. Her parents were her role models, and she absorbed their lessons about fairness, kindness, and hard work. Yet she wasn't naive. She knew the world didn't always judge people by their merits. She'd seen the skepticism on people's faces when they discovered her parents were behind a growing multi-million-dollar company. The trip to Teterboro Airport that day was prompted by a family emergency. Malcolm's father, James, was hospitalized in Atlanta. A serious heart condition had escalated rapidly, and the doctors were unsure of his prognosis. The Johnsons had gotten a call late the night before urging them to come as soon as possible. When Malcolm contacted the private jet service he occasionally used for urgent business trips, they confirmed Captain Hughes could be ready by dawn. The urgency overshadowed any inclination to keep the flight quiet. All that mattered was seeing James. If traveling by private jet would buy them precious hours, they would do it spare no expense. Aaliyah, trembling at the thought of losing her grandfather, clung to hope. Never could they have expected that an airport cop would doubt their legitimacy or mock them on sight. Malcolm had endured enough subtle racism and microaggressions throughout his life to recognize the undercurrent of prejudice. But it still stung, especially when directed at his wife and child. After Officer Roberts had walked off with their IDs, they stood near the airplane's staircase, hearts pounding. Captain Hughes reassured them multiple times that he would do everything in his power to ensure a prompt departure. "I'll talk to security, the ground staff, anyone who can clear this up," he said. However, the spectacle unfolding was about more than just IDs or flight confirmations. It was about the quiet, persistent prejudice that reared its head in places where one might least expect it. In the hush of that early morning, overshadowed by the sleek planes and roaring jet engines, the Johnson family's dignity was at stake. They were forced to prove themselves worthy, not just to an airline or an airport policy, but to one man's biased perspective. Malcolm replayed his father's words in his mind about how real character shows in how you treat people you don't need. Right now, Officer Roberts didn't believe he needed to treat them with respect. It was the kind of affront Malcolm had always feared for Aaliyah to witness. And if the officer's sneer was any indication, the worst was yet to come. While Captain Hughes phoned the private terminal's administrative office, Officer Roberts went behind the security booth, glaring at the family from afar. In that cramped office, a small team of airport security staff worked behind computer monitors, verifying flight manifests and scanning background checks for high-profile passengers. Normally, any query about passenger credentials would be swiftly handled via a digital system. But Roberts insisted on a manual check, his suspicion fueled by prejudice rather than any real cause. He slapped the Johnsons' documents onto the desk, leaning in with a stern expression. "Run these names," he barked. "I want everything: criminal records, outstanding warrants, anything." The security clerk, a short man named Luis, scowled. "Roberts, we usually just check if they're on a watch list or if the flight manifest matches. We don't do deep dives without probable cause." Roberts' jaw tightened. "Well, consider this probable cause. I think these folks might be up to something." Luis opened his mouth to protest, but a quick glare from Roberts stifled any argument. Grumbling under his breath, Luis typed the names into the system. One by one, the results came back clean. No warrants, no criminal history, nothing even remotely suspicious. They weren't on any no-fly list. Their flight details matched the manifest. He slid the printouts across the desk. "All clear, as expected," he said pointedly. Roberts glared at the paper's frustration etched into his features. "Look up the father's company," he said. "What is that about?" He yanked a phone out of his pocket and launched a web browser searching for Malcolm Johnson's name. It didn't take long before he found stories on Malcolm's successful tech startup and philanthropic work. Even so, confirmation of Malcolm's success didn't dampen Roberts' sense of indignation. Louise, sensing the tension, muttered, "Why are you harassing them, Roberts? They checked out. Let them board. They're obviously legitimate passengers." But the officer ignored him, turning on his heel and marching back outside. He found Captain Hughes standing near the steps of the G650, finishing a phone call. The pilot hung up and addressed Roberts calmly. "I spoke to the terminal manager. They confirm the Johnsons have a valid charter arrangement. Our flight plan is cleared to depart in an hour." Officer Roberts scoffed. "I can't just let them breeze on board because your manager said so," he retorted. "Mind telling me why you're in such a hurry with that family?" He jerked a thumb toward the Johnsons, who stood a few yards away, brows furrowed in confusion and anxiety. Captain Hughes raised an eyebrow. "That family, sir. They're my passengers' clients of the charter service, and they're good people dealing with a medical emergency." He paused, glancing at the Johnsons. "I'd appreciate a bit of understanding." Roberts grunted. "They're not the usual type we see. Something's off." A flicker of annoyance crossed Captain Hughes's face, but he kept his tone measured. "Then you should know everything checks out. Your system must have confirmed as much. Now, if you'd please return their documents, we need to start the pre-flight protocols." But Roberts' pride was on the line. He stood his ground, arms folded, scanning the faces of Malcolm, Denise, and Aaliyah. When he spoke, his voice dripped with condescension. "I've seen a lot of folks try to pull stunts to get on these flights. Drug dealers, scammers, you name it. Don't act like it doesn't happen." Malcolm, overhearing, took a step forward. Though his voice trembled slightly, he spoke with resolve. "Officer, I don't appreciate the insinuation. My family is going through a crisis. We've presented all the paperwork. We've followed every protocol." Roberts eyed him. "We'll see. For now, you're not boarding." A hush settled over the area. The swirl of activity on the tarmac seemed to fade into background noise, as though the entire airport was holding its breath. Aaliyah clutched her mother's arm, her eyes darting from the officer's grimace to her father's tense posture. Denise's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flashing with indignation. Captain Hughes stepped forward, voice low but firm. "Officer Roberts, if you delay this flight without cause, you could be held responsible for any consequences. I'd advise you to reconsider." It was a subtle warning, a hint at the potential fallout from interfering with a charter flight cleared for takeoff. Roberts squared his shoulders, momentarily uncertain, but the prejudice he clung to was too strong. Without another word, he turned abruptly and stomped back to the security booth, the tension in his wake as thick as summer humidity. Malcolm exhaled, eyes downcast. "I just want to see my father," he muttered, as if trying to reassure himself more than anyone else. "Why does this have to happen now?" Denise rubbed his back gently. "We'll make it, Malcolm. We have to." Captain Hughes gave them a reassuring nod. "I'll ensure this gets resolved. One way or another, we'll get you to Atlanta." They stood in silence, not knowing what fresh obstacle Officer Roberts might conjure next. But across the runway, the cop was on his phone, a predatory grin curling his lips. He still smelled blood in the water, and he wasn't going to let the Johnsons off that easily. At Teterborough's private terminal, Captain Hughes was a familiar face. Having flown for both commercial airlines and private charter services, he carried himself with a confidence earned through years of experience. He was also a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel, which afforded him respect from most who recognized the insignias still adorning his personal flight bag. After another fruitless conversation with Officer Roberts, Captain Hughes faced the Johnsons on the steps of the jet. "He's insistent on causing problems," he said, frustration coloring his voice. "He claims he's waiting for further instructions from his superiors, but the truth is, he's stonewalling. I haven't seen him treat passengers like this before, at least not without a legitimate tip-off or explicit directive. Aaliyah looked up with pleading eyes. "But Grandpa needs us." Those words cut through Captain Hughes's heart. He glanced at the terminal, then turned back to the family. "Here's what we'll do. If Roberts tries to prevent you from boarding, I will formally refuse to depart without my passengers. We'll escalate it higher if we have to. I can contact the Federal Aviation Administration's liaison at the airport if needed." Denise managed a grateful smile. "You don't know how much that means to us. Thank you." Hughes guided them into the jet's spacious cabin, a realm of soft leather seats and polished wooden panels. A flight attendant introduced herself as Gloria and offered the family refreshments. Despite the plush surroundings, anxiety crackled in the air. Malcolm fidgeted with his phone, checking updates about his father's condition. Denise tried to keep Aaliyah calm by encouraging her to explore the cabin. But Aaliyah couldn't shake the unease of that confrontation on the tarmac. Outside, time ticked away. 15 minutes turned into 30. The scheduled departure crept closer. Over the next half hour, Captain Hughes hopped in and out of the cockpit, conferring with air traffic control, verifying flight paths, and updating ground services. Each time he returned, determined to keep the family informed. Finally, an airport representative, an older gentleman named Harold, boarded the plane. He spoke quietly with Captain Hughes before turning to the Johnsons. "I'm sorry about the inconvenience. Officer Roberts claims there's a discrepancy in your paperwork. We can't find any such discrepancy, so we've told him there's no legal ground to detain you." Harold sighed, removing his cap. "He's being stubborn, but we are prepared to overrule him if necessary. However, he insists on one last review. We're hoping to avoid a big scene, but if it escalates, we'll have to involve the Port Authority Police directly or even the TSA. We want to spare you the stress." Malcolm clenched his jaw, frustration mounting. "We just need to go. Why is he doing this?" Harold's eyes flickered with sympathy. "I have seen his type before, someone who sees a family that doesn't fit his narrow idea of the usual client and decides that's reason enough to dig. It's not right, but we're addressing it." At that moment, Captain Hughes announced, "We're set to taxi in 20 minutes, with or without his blessing. If they want to physically stop us, they'll have to present a legal injunction. The charter company's legal team is on standby." 15 minutes later, Officer Roberts stormed out of the security booth, the radio on his shoulder crackling. He stomped across the tarmac to the foot of the jet's staircase, glaring up at the cabin door. He barked something at the ground crew, who simply shrugged and pointed at the cockpit. Captain Hughes descended to speak with him, leaving the Johnsons tense in their seats. A short heated exchange ensued. From inside the cabin, the family could see Roberts gesturing wildly, pointing at the aircraft, shaking his head. Captain Hughes stood firm, arms folded, occasionally nodding or pressing a finger to his lips as though trying to talk sense into the officer. Finally, Captain Hughes stepped back inside, his face set. "Roberts is threatening to call for backup," he told them. "He's claiming I'm obstructing police authority." A wry grin crossed his lips. "But I let him know he's well out of line, and if he tries to arrest me, we'll see how that holds up in front of a federal judge." Gloria, the flight attendant, held her breath. She had never witnessed such blatant intimidation on the tarmac. Normally, private flights ran like clockwork: quick ID checks, casual greetings, a short taxi, and then wheels up. "I'm going to file a formal complaint on your behalf," Harold added. "This behavior is unacceptable." Captain Hughes nodded his thanks. Then he looked at the Johnsons, especially Aaliyah, and placed a reassuring hand on the back of a seat. "I've flown with all kinds of passengers, from everyday families to celebrities and corporate execs, and I can't recall such hostility without any valid reason. Let me assure you, I won't let him bully us." You deserve to reach Atlanta in time to see your loved one." Roberts remained at the bottom of the stairs, glaring at them through the open doorway. It was almost comical, an officer determined to posture powerless to present any real legal reason to halt the flight. And time was running out. With a resolute nod, Captain Hughes straightened his uniform. "We have clearance to taxi if he wants to stand in front of the jet that's on him, but we are leaving. I refuse to fly without my passengers, all of them." Those words were a declaration. The Johnsons exchanged relieved glances, though anxiety still pulsed in their veins. Malcolm whispered, "Thank you one more time," voice thick with gratitude and the emotional strain of the morning. This pilot's stance wasn't just about making a flight. It was an affirmation of justice, of the right to travel without harassment. Soon, the seatbelt signs would illuminate, and the engines would roar to life. The question remained, would Officer Roberts cause one final disruption, or would he stand aside and watch his manufactured authority crumble under the weight of the pilots and the law's resolve? Officer Daniel Roberts's resolve might have seemed inexplicable at first glance, but behind every prejudice, there's a story. Born in a small New Jersey town, Roberts came from a blue-collar family that clung to old biases. His father, a retired police sergeant, was known for turning minor altercations into arrests. Roberts grew up listening to the dinner table talk, laced with judgments about who was suspicious and who wasn't. In his early years at the police academy, Roberts struggled academically, consistently scoring near the bottom of his class. But he could schmooze well enough, making allies among the instructors who admired his dad. He graduated, though not with distinction. His subsequent assignments, mostly street patrol, were peppered with complaints of excessive force and bias. Somehow each complaint was dismissed or quietly settled, often with hush money. Over time, Roberts learned to be more subtle, yet the underlying prejudice remained. When he was eventually transferred to Teterboro Airport, it was seen by many as a soft landing. No high-speed chases, no major busts, just routine checks, ensuring no contraband made it onto high-profile flights. Many believed it was the department's way of keeping him out of trouble and away from communities he had historically over-policed. In truth, Roberts hated it. He felt like the airport was a demotion. Where was the thrill, the adrenaline, the so-called real policing? Whenever a person who didn't look or act the part of the typical wealthy traveler showed up, his alarms went off. Even if he wouldn't admit it, the ingrained prejudice compelled him to suspect wrongdoing. Seeing the Johnsons at a pristine Gulfstream roused all his insecurities. He assumed that if they didn't flaunt designer attire or talk like corporate executives, they couldn't possibly be legitimate. A swirl of unspoken resentment turned into contempt. Even as he grumbled on the phone with his superiors, they told him to stand down. The flight was legitimate, documents verified. Yet he refused to yield. Captain Hughes's defiance only fueled his anger. The pilot wasn't just ignoring him, he was challenging him, showing him up in front of bystanders. Roberts's father had always told him, "Never let civilians question your authority. You are the law." These words echoed in his mind, fueling his resolve to block the plane's departure. But in the recesses of his psyche, fear also brewed. Fear that if he failed here, if he let these suspects go, he'd be mocked by the other officers labeled incompetent. Fear that if he didn't produce some kind of justification for his actions, he'd face departmental scrutiny. He paced the tarmac, swirling in his own bitter thoughts. He saw the ground crew look at him quizzically. Some even shook their heads. The pilot, the Johnsons, the airport staff, everyone seemed aligned against him. How dare they? He was the one in uniform, the one protecting the airport from threats. Or so he believed. Without an actual violation to latch onto, he was left with unsubstantial suspicion. But that didn't stop him from doubling down. Holding onto the bare thread of authority he wielded, he made more calls. He told the dispatch operator to send backup, claiming a potential security situation. The operator sounded puzzled, but obliged, adding that she'd notify the Port Authority if needed. Back inside the jet, the Johnsons wondered if they'd ever get off the ground. Malcolm's phone buzzed with texts from his sister updating him on James's condition. "Dad's stable, but doctors say it's critical you get here soon." Each message tightened the knot in his chest. "I can't believe this," Denise whispered. "We've cleared every hurdle. What else does he want?" Captain Hughes checked his watch. "If we push back more than an hour, we risk losing our takeoff slot. I'm sorry for the stress. Let me see if there's a final measure I can take." The pilot strode toward the hatch, intending to have a stern word with Roberts and the ground control manager. Meanwhile, Aaliyah slumped in her seat, tears prickling her eyes. She had seen racism depicted in documentaries, heard about it in her parents' cautionary tales, but witnessing the blatant nature of it firsthand was a different weight altogether. Denise pulled her into a hug, stroking her hair. Whatever illusions Roberts held about his unassailable authority were about to crash headlong into the unwavering integrity of Captain Hughes and the collective power of the airport staff, who believed in doing what was right. But how far would Roberts go before realizing his stand was crumbling beneath him? The path he'd chosen led to a confrontation that would shape his future, for better or worse. Within moments, the air vibrated with tension. A second airport police cruiser rolled onto the tarmac, lights flashing. Two uniformed officers stepped out, each wearing expressions of confusion and caution. One was a middle-aged woman named Officer Maria Velasquez. The other, a younger man named Officer Chris Larkin. They were answering Roberts's call for backup, though they hadn't expected to find a standoff over a routine private charter. Officer Velasquez approached Roberts, who stood near the bottom of the jet's stairs, arms folded defiantly. "What's the situation?" she asked, casting a wary glance at the Gulf Stream. Captain Hughes waited near the open door above, ready to argue his case. Roberts puffed out his chest. "These passengers might be fraudulent. The pilot is obstructing my investigation. I called you for support?" Velasquez raised an eyebrow. "Fraudulent? Did they fail ID checks or show up on a watch list?" She pulled out a notepad, clearly trying to do things by the book. Roberts hesitated. "No watch lists, but they're suspicious. Their story about a family emergency, I don't buy it." Officer Larkin studied Roberts' rigid posture, his red-faced anger. He then looked at the Johnsons peering from inside the jet. Malcolm caught Larkin's gaze and gave a polite nod. Denise offered a hesitant wave, her expression a mixture of worry and frustration. "Listen," Dan Larkin said quietly, addressing Roberts by his first name. "We need something concrete, or we can't justify detaining them." Roberts' eyes narrowed. He could feel his authority slipping away. "They don't belong on that plane," he repeated stubbornly. Captain Hughes descended a few steps wearing a resolute expression. "Officers, I'm Richard Hughes, the pilot in command. The Johnson family is traveling to Atlanta under a fully authorized flight plan. Officer Roberts has been detaining us without cause. If you check with the terminal staff, you'll see everything's legitimate." Velasquez nodded, stepping aside to radio the terminal. Within seconds, the staff confirmed the Johnsons' credentials were valid. She then requested any additional instructions from her precinct supervisor. The reply was immediate and unambiguous. "If there's no probable cause, let the passengers proceed." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Roberts's face. He realized he was cornered again. Velasquez and Larkin had no intention of backing a baseless claim. The tension thickened as ground crew members, lured by flashing lights and raised voices, began to gather at a distance. A few even recorded video on their phones. Harold, the older airport rep, joined the circle. "Officer, let them board. I have the charter company on the line, and they're prepared to file a complaint for harassment if this continues." Roberts felt the gazes of everyone upon him. The pressure was immense, his face flushed with anger. He spat out, "Complaint? I'm doing my job. There's something about these people that doesn't add up." Malcolm, unable to remain silent, stepped forward cautiously. "With respect, officer, we have complied with every security measure. We've shown our IDs, our flight documents. We've done nothing wrong. This is pure harassment." Roberts whirled on him. "Watch your tone." Immediately, Officer Velasquez stepped between them, hand raised. "That's enough, Dan. Calm down." The pilot climbed another step down. "Officer Roberts, I must inform you that if you continue to obstruct us, you will personally be responsible for this plane missing its flight slot. That's not just inconvenient, it's a significant financial matter, and the charter company might pursue damages." Roberts glared at him, but behind the anger flickered a hint of desperation. He was in too deep to concede graciously. Suddenly, the radio on Roberts's belt crackled. A voice boomed, "Roberts, you have made your point. We received the call from your backup. You have no basis to detain them. Stand down and return to normal duties. That's an order." A hush fell. Everyone heard it. It was his supervisor's voice, leaving no room for doubt. The ground crew, Captain Hughes, the Johnsons, and even the backup officers all watched for Roberts's reaction. The weight of authority had spoken. He had nowhere to hide. Several heartbeats passed. Roberts's fists clenched. Then, with a furious scowl, he barked a single word, "Fine." He turned abruptly, storming away from the plane. Velasquez and Larkin exchanged relieved glances, stepping aside to let the pilot finish his boarding process. A few bystanders watched Roberts march toward his cruiser, though to everyone's surprise, he didn't drive away. He parked himself by the car, arms crossed, a menacing silhouette against the early morning light. Captain Hughes exhaled slowly. "We're clear to depart. Let's do this quickly." Malcolm, Denise, and Aaliyah stepped onto the stairs, hearts hammering but relieved. Aaliyah kept her head down, not wanting to meet Roberts's gaze. As they entered the cabin, the tension began to slip away, replaced by the realization that they could finally see James, hopefully before it was too late. But one question lingered. Would Roberts now, publicly humiliated, let them leave in peace? Or did he have one last card to play? Nobody knew, but the wheels were already turning toward the next chapter in this drama. And one thing was certain: the reverberations of that standoff would travel far beyond Teterborough's runway. The Gulfstream G650's engines roared to life as Captain Hughes eased the throttles forward. Out on the tarmac, Officer Roberts stood in the distance, eyes fixated on the plane taxiing away from the private terminal. A swirl of emotions coursed through him: rage, humiliation, a stubborn refusal to admit he'd been wrong. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was one of relief, tempered by lingering anxiety. Aaliyah pressed her face against the oval window, watching the airfield move by. Denise glanced at her husband, noticing the tension still etched into his features. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. Another text from his sister-dad's stable, "But you should hurry." He gripped the armrest and swallowed hard. Gloria, the attendant, approached with a gentle smile, offering bottled water and tissues. "We should have a smooth flight," she said kindly. "Captain expects it to be about 2 hours to Atlanta." Aaliyah nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, voice still shaky. Her mother rubbed her back gently. "We'll get there soon," Denise murmured. As the plane reached the runway, Captain Hughes received final clearance from air traffic control. The engines surged, pressing them into their seats, and the ground fell away beneath them. Above, the New Jersey skyline receded into the distance, replaced by a boundless blue sky. Yet the events on the ground continued to ripple through their thoughts. Malcolm took a moment to breathe, letting the hum of the engines soothe his frazzled nerves. He typed out a text to his sister, "We're airborne. Land in 2 hours. Hang in there." Then he leaned back, closing his eyes. Scenes from the confrontation reeled in his mind: Roberts' sneer, the humiliating questioning, the tension that could have easily escalated into a wrongful arrest. Denise clasped his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You kept your cool. So many times I just wanted to scream at him, but I saw you hold it together." Malcolm squeezed her hand in return. "I couldn't let him see me lose it," he admitted, "and I didn't want Aaliyah to be any more scared." Aaliyah shifted in her seat, turning to face them. "Mom, Dad," her voice trembled. "I've seen this kind of stuff on the news, but I never thought it would happen to us. Not like this. It was just so open." He made no effort to hide what he thought of us. Denise ran her fingers through Aaliyah's hair. "I'm sorry you had to see that baby. We always try to protect you, but sometimes the world doesn't cooperate. What matters is, we stood our ground and we had allies." "Yes," Malcolm agreed, a note of gratitude creeping into his voice. "Captain Hughes, the airport staff, they did the right thing." Gloria reappeared to brief them on flight safety and mention they were free to use the in-flight entertainment or request snacks. She set out a small tray of fruit and pastries. Despite the tension, Aaliyah's appetite had returned, and she nibbled at a blueberry muffin. Denise sipped orange juice, trying to calm the lingering adrenaline. "Once we land," Malcolm said, "I'm heading straight to the hospital. Denise, you might want to find a nearby hotel where Aaliyah can rest. We don't know how late we'll be there." Aaliyah frowned. "I want to see Grandpa too," she insisted. "I can handle a hospital visit." Before Denise could respond, Captain Hughes's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. The flight should be smooth with clear skies, reported all the way to Atlanta. We'll do our best to make up for the delay on the ground. Estimated arrival is about an hour and 50 minutes from now. Please relax and let us know if you need anything." Malcolm whispered, "Thank you, Captain," though the pilot wouldn't hear him from the cockpit. He felt immense gratitude for the man's refusal to leave without them. That single act of solidarity had turned what could have been a deeper nightmare into a stand for justice. Still, Malcolm couldn't shake the thought that Officer Roberts might try to spin the story. In the age of social media, he feared rumors could spread, or that somehow the officer might have connections to cause trouble down the line. Shaking his head, he refocused on his father, pushing the drama at Teterboro aside for now. As the aircraft hummed steadily southward, the Johnson family settled into an uneasy calm. The plush seats, the soft lighting, the gentle background music, every luxury of private jet travel felt surreal after the morning's turbulence. But at least they were airborne, racing against time to reach James Johnson's hospital bed. Outside, the sky glowed a brilliant hue as the sun climbed higher, promising a bright day. Yet for all its radiance, a shadow still loomed, a promise that the confrontation with Officer Roberts was far from over. Something in the way he refused to stand down, even under direct orders, hinted at more trouble on the horizon. For now, though, they had a mission to get to Atlanta in time for Grandpa James. Everything else would have to wait. In the days following the Johnsons' departure from Teterboro, Officer Roberts found himself under a scrutinizing glare of internal reviews. The airport's security chief, along with the Port Authority and the local police department, had received multiple complaints. Captain Hughes had filed a detailed report, as did Harold, the airport representative. Several witnesses provided statements about Roberts's aggressive demeanor and baseless accusations. At first, Roberts tried to dismiss the matter. "I was only doing my job," he insisted, "protecting the airport from potential threats. If we let everyone pass without checking, we'd be in trouble." But the video recordings, captured by ground crew, painted a troubling picture, one where the Johnsons were fully cooperative, their documents in order, while Roberts repeatedly mocked them and delayed the flight. The department placed him on a temporary administrative leave pending investigation. This stung deeply, as he was essentially confined to desk duty at best, or risked indefinite suspension at worst. Anger gnawed at him. He spent long hours in his small apartment, glowering at his phone, seething over news reports that painted him as the antagonist in a discrimination case. "Officer harasses black family at Teterboro," read one local blog post. A trending hashtag on social media took aim at his actions, calling for accountability. Roberts paced his living room, phone in hand, scanning posts on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. People were outraged. Some demanded he be fired immediately, others threatened protests. His email inbox, usually barren, now overflowed with hate messages. The blow to his pride was colossal. He blamed the Johnsons, the pilot, the airport staff, everyone except himself. Meanwhile, the Johnsons had made it to Atlanta just in time. James Johnson's condition stabilized. The doctors performed a life-saving procedure, and after a few tense days in critical care, he showed signs of improvement. Malcolm, Denise, and Aaliyah were by his side, breathing a collective sigh of relief as each day passed without dire news. On the evening James was transferred from the ICU to a regular hospital room, Malcolm stepped outside to call Captain Hughes and thank him once more. The pilot answered on the first ring. "How's your father?" he asked. "He's on the mend," Malcolm replied. His voice weighted with gratitude. "We made it just in time. I can't thank you enough, Captain." Hughes sounded relieved. "That's good to hear. As for our friend Officer Roberts, well, there's been a formal investigation. I'm not sure if you want to get involved, but some folks might reach out to you. I included your contact in my report with your permission, of course." Malcolm paused, recalling how humiliating that experience was. "I'll cooperate if they need me. People like him shouldn't be allowed to harass innocent families." They chatted a bit more, exchanging well wishes, and ended the call with mutual respect. Returning to the waiting room, Malcolm caught Denise's eye. She offered him a knowing look, gently placing a hand on his arm. "Everything okay?" He nodded. "I think so. Dad's stable, and we might have to give statements about Officer Roberts." "I think we should do it." Denise agreed. "Absolutely. He can't just keep doing this." The hospital corridor bustled around them. Nurses wheeled carts of medicine, families waited anxiously for updates on their loved ones. Amid the swirl of life and death, the Johnsons felt a renewed sense of purpose. If James's crisis had reminded them that life is precious, the Teterboro incident had reminded them that fairness is worth fighting for. As they settled in for another night in the hospital, a short news segment about Teterboro aired on a local channel. They watched as a reporter interviewed an airport official. The official stated that the family in question had faced unjust profiling and that the officer was under investigation. Malcolm felt a flash of discomfort at seeing their story retold on TV, but also a surge of gratitude that the truth was out. Meanwhile, Officer Roberts watched the same broadcast from his recliner, eyes burning with resentment. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered it, half expecting more vitriol. Instead, a smooth voice introduced himself as a representative of a local police union. "We'd like to help you manage this situation," the caller said. "We believe the public is overreacting. You are just being cautious, right?" A glimmer of hope sparked in Roberts, finally someone who saw things his way. But the conversation quickly shifted into talk of damage control, public perception, and media spin. They wanted him to give a statement clarifying his side, maybe mention suspicious behavior or non-compliance. Roberts hesitated, knowing that every bit of footage and testimony contradicted such a narrative. Still, the temptation to salvage his career was strong. That family was definitely acting suspicious, Roberts muttered, ignoring the pit of doubt in his stomach. They didn't look like the usual passengers. As the union rep laid out a possible strategy, Roberts felt the noose of accountability loosen slightly. Perhaps he could paint himself as the victim, an officer just doing his job. But would it be enough to deflect blame? He clung to that hope like a drowning man grabs a lifebuoy. Little did he know that the ripple effects of his actions were still spreading. More voices were joining the conversation. Videos of the confrontation garnered tens of thousands of views. And behind the scenes, the Johnsons were preparing to speak their truth in any forum required. Whether Roberts liked it or not, he was barreling toward a reckoning, a collision course with karma that would test every lie he tried to spin. 3 weeks passed. James Johnson recovered enough to return home, though he needed regular checkups. The Johnsons, still in Atlanta, chose to stay by his side until he was fully out of danger. During that time, Malcolm fielded calls from attorneys, investigators, and news outlets seeking interviews about the Teterboro incident. One morning, Malcolm and Denise sat at the dining table, going through a flurry of emails. Among them was a message from the Teterboro Police Internal Affairs Division. They requested an official statement about the harassment. Malcolm sighed. "Looks like I have to do this on record." Denise squeezed his hand in encouragement. "We should. If we don't, he'll just keep doing this to other people." That same day, Officer Roberts found himself sitting across from a panel of stern-faced individuals, members of Internal Affairs. The conference room was sterile, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a tape recorder in the middle of the long table. Roberts felt like a schoolboy in the principal's office, desperately spinning excuses. "What exactly made you suspect the Johnson family?" asked a bespectacled investigator, flipping through pages of typed testimony. Roberts cleared his throat. They seemed out of place. No fancy luggage, no high-end clothing. "I thought they might be trying to sneak onto a private jet." Another investigator leaned forward. The flight manifest listed them as legitimate passengers with matching IDs. Why wasn't that enough? Roberts tried to maintain eye contact. "People can forge documents," he argued. "I was being cautious." Besides, the father had a defensive attitude. The first investigator cut him off. Multiple witnesses reported that Mr. Johnson was polite and compliant. "Are you saying they're lying?" A bead of sweat rolled down Roberts's temple. "I only know what I experienced," he mumbled. As the questioning continued, it became painfully clear that Roberts had no credible evidence, only assumptions shaped by prejudice. The panel heard him out, but each vague excuse was methodically dismantled. They took breaks to listen to audio from the tarmac, to watch videos captured by the ground crew. In those videos, Roberts's voice dripped with condescension. His body language revealed aggression, no sign of actual wrongdoing from the Johnsons. After the hearing, Roberts emerged rattled, unsure of his future. The union rep gave him a stiff nod, offering little solace. Roberts realized the department might cut him loose to salvage their own image. The public outcry was too loud to ignore. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Malcolm participated in a video call with the investigating panel. He recounted every moment of the ordeal: the intimidation, the humiliating laughter, the fear that they might be denied the chance to see his father in time. He spoke calmly, yet emotion simmered beneath his words. Denise and Aaliyah hovered in the background supporting him. When asked if he believed Officer Roberts' actions were racially motivated, Malcolm took a measured breath. "I can't see inside his mind, but it's clear he judged us based on stereotypes. If we'd walked up in designer suits, or if we weren't black, I doubt we'd have faced such an ordeal." His statement resonated. The investigators thanked him. Over the next few days, more interviews followed airport staff, Captain Hughes, other police officers who arrived as backup. The weight of evidence stacked higher against Roberts with each passing hour. Then one crisp morning, the internal affairs verdict arrived. Officer Daniel Roberts was found to have violated multiple conduct policies, including discrimination and misuse of police authority. The department chose to terminate his employment effective immediately. They also forwarded their findings to the local district attorney, who would decide if further legal action was warranted. Roberts received the news via a terse phone call. He sank into his chair, gut twisting. The union rep he once leaned on offered only a hollow, "Sorry, we did our best." Soon after, local media outlets reported that Officer Roberts had been dismissed. His photograph flashed on screens, accompanied by headlines labeling him an example of police misconduct at an airport known for high-profile travelers. His downfall was swift. No severance, no chance of a smooth transition to another precinct. He became a pariah, an emblem of bigotry that the police force had been forced to reject. Watching it all unfold from Atlanta, Malcolm experienced a flurry of conflicting emotions. Relief because justice seemed served. Sadness because no one truly wins when prejudice rears its head. Everyone ends up scarred. Gratitude because their story was believed, validated. He thought of Aaliyah, how this would shape her outlook on authority on the world. Perhaps she'd take comfort in seeing that bad actions had consequences. Indeed, Roberts's undoing felt like hard karma, as though the universe itself demanded accountability. And if the news cycle moved on, the Johnsons would return home with a renewed commitment to spread awareness and fight injustice wherever it lurked. Weeks later, peace returned to Teterboro Airport. Captain Hughes strode across the sunlit tarmac, the golden morning reminding him of the day he took a stand. He exchanged a firm handshake with Harold, the airport rep. "How are things?" Hughes asked, surveying the calmer atmosphere. "Better," Harold replied with a small grin. "Since Roberts got fired, morale's up. No one's worried about arbitrary confrontations. We've also tightened procedures. This won't happen again." "Good," Hughes said firmly. "Passengers deserve respect." In Atlanta, the Johnsons prepared to return home. James Johnson had recovered well, urging the family to get back to normal life. Before leaving, Malcolm organized a quiet gathering to celebrate his father's healing and the strength they'd drawn from each other. During it, Aaliyah shared sketches. She'd drawn portraits of James, their family, and the jet soaring against a stormy sky. James's eyes welled up. "These are beautiful, sweetheart." Aaliyah smiled shyly. "You gave me hope, Grandpa." The next day, they opted for a commercial flight back to Newark, avoiding unnecessary attention. The journey was uneventful lines, a brief delay, then a smooth landing, but life felt different now. Back home, daily routines resumed. Aaliyah tackled school projects, Denise resumed managing the foundation, and Malcolm dove into business. Yet the airport ordeal left a lasting imprint. The family channeled their experience into action, donating to law enforcement bias training programs and mentoring local youth. One afternoon, Malcolm received a letter inviting him to speak at a community forum near Teterboro. After discussing it with Denise, he accepted. He didn't want to sow hatred. He believed in accountability, not antagonism. He wanted to offer perspective. At the forum, Malcolm stood before a modest crowd. He spoke of fear and injustice, but also of courage and allyship. He highlighted Captain Hughes' unwavering integrity and emphasized how standing up together makes a difference. The story made the evening news, praising the Johnsons for transforming adversity into advocacy. Viewers saw not just a family wronged, but a family that chose to rise. Meanwhile, Officer Roberts faded from headlines. Rejected by police departments, he settled for night shifts at a private security firm in another county. His name lingered in law enforcement circles as a cautionary tale. For the Johnsons, new doors opened. Malcolm's company grew, integrating deeper social impact. Denise expanded scholarship programs. Aaliyah, inspired by what she'd lived through, poured her emotions into art, tackling justice and empathy. That single confrontation on the tarmac became more than an isolated incident. It became a ripple, reshaping lives and sparking change. And through it all, James Johnson's steady heartbeat reminded them, time is precious, and the path we chart matters. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey of courage, unity, and unexpected twists. In the face of blatant discrimination, the Johnson family showed us the true power of resilience and integrity, proving that kindness and justice can triumph even in the most trying situations. Meanwhile, karma played its hand, leaving Officer Roberts to confront the consequences of his actions. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply kept you on the edge of your seat, please consider hitting that like button. Share this video with friends and loved ones who need a reminder that standing up for what's right can change lives. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more impactful stories packed with emotion, inspiration, and lessons worth remembering. Your support keeps these stories alive, and together we can keep spreading hope, empathy, and positivity, one story at a time.